Now, before we wrap up our course here on ChatGPT, I want to talk a little bit about some tips and tricks to keep in mind when it comes to using this application. First things first, tell your AI to take a deep breath. This sounds very weird, but it actually goes a long way in ensuring that you get accurate responses, particularly when you're not using the more advanced models and you're using some of the older models, whether it's the 4.0 mini or the 3.5. What you're doing when you're telling your AI to take a deep breath is to actually pause for a moment and giving it permission to really take its time with its response. So it may delay the speed in which you get a response, but that extra bit of time can make the difference between getting an inaccurate or biased response and getting one that's accurate and unbiased. So telling your AI to take a deep breath is a huge tool. And I'm actually going to add an additional one here. Tell your AI to think through step by step. And what I mean by these things is to literally type these into your prompts. At the end of your prompt, either say, take a deep breath, or type in, think through this step by step. What that enables and what that instructs your AI to do is actually provide a logical reasoning for how it came to this conclusion. So when it gives you a response, it'll actually say, this is how I came to this conclusion. I considered this first, and then I did this, similar to the way that we think through things logically. So those two little instructions that you can put at the end of your prompts can really help enhance your experience. So take a deep breath and think through step by step. Another tip and trick is to use other AI tools to vet responses from ChatGPT. We're going to talk about this a lot, but AI is not infallible. It's going to make mistakes, and it's prone to making mistakes. It's only as good as the data that we train it on. One way to help mitigate that and to help prevent our miscomings, because we may not always be able to spot those mistakes that it makes, is to actually utilize other AI tools. Say, for example, I have a prompt response that ChatGPT gave me. I can actually copy that prompt and input it to Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, Claude, etc. And I can ask that AI, can you review ChatGPT's response for accuracy, for bias, etc. And those AI tools will actually provide a critique of ChatGPT's response there. So that's a great way to just utilize other AI technology to help make sure that you're getting the best responses from your AI systems. Set limits on GPT's answers. What do I mean by that? Well, again, our AI's goal is to try to answer our questions with the utmost accuracy and efficacy, meaning that sometimes it gets excited and it'll give us a page or 2 pages worth of answers. What you can do is you can actually set limitations. So you can say, hey, chat, in your response, write me a maximum of 2 to 3 sentences. If you recall at the very beginning of the course, I asked ChatGPT what it is, and I told it, can you write a couple sentences to a maximum of a paragraph? By giving those format limitations, it's going to help you make sure you're getting answers the way that you want it, and it also helps prevent the AI from bombarding you with an extremely long and a bit tedious response. Tabular form. Did you know that in your prompts, you can actually give specific instructions in terms of how you want to get a response? What I mean by that is format. So let's say you want the response on the table. You can actually type in tabular form, can you help me determine the differences between a Honda Accord and a Honda Civic? And ChatGPT will actually provide you those information in a table format. You can do the same, you can ask it to provide it in a chart. You can also add it to provide you in a bulleted list form, and so on and so forth. So use those formatting options. Again, this is where we're starting to expand your creativity a bit. I didn't know for quite a long time that I can do this, and now that I know it, I use it quite often. And then one of the last things I want to talk about in terms of tips and tricks is to have ChatGPT write prompts for you that you can use in other AI agents. Say, for example, for those of you who might be familiar with the seemingly hundreds of thousands of AI tools that are out there, there's a big one called MidJourney, and MidJourney has actually been very popular amongst AI users for creating images. I'm not the best in terms of creative AI prompt writing. It's almost its own skill set for me, and we talked a little bit about that as we saw you. There's a level of specificity that you have to have, and knowing just how accurate and how be as descriptive as possible in order to get the best image possible. I'm not great at it. You know who is great at it though? ChatGPT. So what I can do is I can ask ChatGPT to help me create a prompt that I can utilize for MidJourney. So say I want to create an image of my Dungeons & Dragons character for my campaign that I'm playing. I can give ChatGPT a basic description of that character, and I can say, hey, can you create a prompt that I can use to input into MidJourney so that MidJourney can create this image for me? And ChatGPT will analyze it, create that prompt, And because it's an expert in that level of prompt writing skill, my MidJourney image will now be so much better for it. So you can actually use one AI system to help create prompts for another one. Those are a couple of tips and tricks there. I want to move on to some best practices and some considerations to make and some ways to help troubleshoot your time with ChatGPT. Oops. Let's talk about privacy and ethical use. It's a big question, one that there's a lot of concern about as AI seems to be on the rise. We actually have an entire course dedicated to ethical and responsible use of AI. But here's just a couple of things specifically to ChatGPT. Number one, always be mindful of sensitive information. When possible, maybe remove names or remove titles. If it's not necessary, you can still get a lot of answers, specifically when it comes to data analysis, without including that information. So just be mindful of that, especially because your ChatGPT is building memory and being trained on that data. If there's some sensitive information you don't want it to have, please make sure to block it out. You can also utilize the temporary chat feature to help mitigate some of that as well. That also goes in line with AI data banking. Essentially what we mean by that is that contextual memory where ChatGPT is keeping track of all of your conversations. Every now and then you might see when you put in a prompt, it'll say memory updated. It's capturing that information on that request and then using it to learn from. If you don't want that, always turn off your chat memory, put on temporary chat. Understanding biases. We've heard me mention that a couple times in terms of mitigating, but we have to understand that as powerful as artificial intelligence is, it is limited to the human data that it has access to. It is limited to the input that we put into it. So if your AI is trained on bad data, you are going to get biased and inaccurate results. If the prompts that you write in your AI have biases or are inaccurate, you increase the risk of getting inaccurate and biased results. And so it's always important to keep in mind those limitations when using ChatGPT. Don't just take that first answer, use it as a launching point to iterate and refine on. And you can always double check online, or you can even ask your own AI, how up to date are you? As I mentioned, the data often has a limitation. The more advanced reasoning models are doing a really good job of getting all of the recent information, but especially for my free users, since we're using an older version, it isn't always up to date. So ask your AI or search on the web, hey, ChatGPT free, how up to date is it? Has it been recent as of April to 2025? Has it been recent up to 2024? Because then you're going to have a better understanding of where the inaccuracies might appear, and you're going to be more alert to processing that and verifying it. And actually using that brings me to my final point here today, which is ChatGPT is a launch point. It is not an endpoint. We talked about it. ChatGPT can and will get things wrong. But more importantly, when it comes to our overall understanding of our relationship with artificial intelligence, it's a collaborator. It doesn't do your work for you. It partners with you to help you get your work done more easily and more efficiently. But you as the human is ultimately the most important character still in this interaction, because you are the one putting in the good data. You are the one making sure that your instructions are clear. You're also the one double checking and assessing the work. And so you cannot forget throughout this, it can be very easy, especially as you start seeing these AI models become more powerful and do more. It can be very easy for us to slip into a mode where we trying to just kick our seat up, relax, and let it do all the work. But that can often lead to some pretty catastrophic events, especially in the workplace. So we need to make sure that number one, we're taking in mind our AI literacy and our prompt writing skills, putting in some good data. And number two, always double checking, always critiquing the responses that we get from your AI. But if you keep these tips and tricks in mind, and you also keep in mind these best practices, I know that you will have a much more efficient and much more enjoyable experience using ChatGPT.